Hi, I'm Terri Murphy, the founder of the Women's Wisdom Network and the senior editor for Realty Times Women in Business, Women in Real Estate, and In the Men's Room with Murph. And boy, do we have a great guy in the men's room today. His name is Jason Hewlett. He is the author of The Promise to the One. And I met Jason years ago as he was on stage, where he went from this incredibly savvy, gorgeous man to this whack job, screaming like a dinosaur. And so after being terrified and totally entertained, who knew that he could do such a fabulous job on this book, The Promise to the One? Welcome, Jason Hewlett.
You're so funny. I could just hang out with you all day and just be like, here I come. That's what we would do. Just have you tell everyone how charming I am, and then, so.
And that's what we need. We need to laugh. Well, you know what? I said when we introduced you at the Houston Association virtual event, I said, you're kind of like a ride at Epcot. Fabulous, but terrifying. Not just a speaker, though. I think that entertainers are a momentary thing. We like to be entertained. We enjoy them. But when you have leadership and over thousands of presentations over the last 20 years, and then you talk about really being a leadership expert and throwing in that fun factor, that remarkable factor. When you wrote The Promise to the One, tell us about how that started for you, because pretty much you were on stage before that.
Oh, yeah. I've been on stage now for 20 years as a performer. And so I started in Las Vegas as a Ricky Martin impersonator, living la vida loca, hey. And then I became Elton John. So I was transforming from living la vida loca to can you feel the love tonight? So I was doing all these different voices and characters that were completely opposite of each other. And then I realized I could do way more than that. And so I put together an act of Jim Carrey and Led Zeppelin and Alvin and the Chipmunks and a Velociraptor and Ricky Martin and Elton John and you name it. And I became a one-man show impersonator doing music, comedy, impressions, but also along with all of that, there was this underlying tone of joyfulness and of confidence in being wacky. And people would hire me for their after-dinner corporate events because I was a G-rated, family-friendly performer. And eventually it became apparent that as I was inserting motivation throughout this show of comedy, that people were saying, you could teach leadership. And then they would invite me to come be the opening keynote. And so I've slowly made this transition into a speaker who is entertaining from the entertainer who was just a positive messenger.
You have an amazing legacy, because I know that when you started, what made you go into that impersonation thing was to survive school.
Oh, yeah, totally. As a kid, I mean, people were like, hey, your mouth is huge. And I was like, you're right. And so I became known as the kid with the big mouth. And I was able to make my friends laugh and people laugh by doing impressions of the teacher or of them, the kids sitting next to me. And so I became known as the kid who could do the voices, whether it was of the people in our classroom or on TV. At the time I was growing up in the 80s, Pee Wee Herman was the biggest hit on TV. So I was like, ha, la, 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 la. Hi, everybody. And so I was really good at making everybody laugh. And then the impersonations allowed me to try to express my real personality. And that's become a part of my story, is sharing how we discover our own voice, even while I was sharing the voice of others.
Oh, and you do it exquisitely well. I mean, there are a lot of impersonators out there, and you actually have a whole podcast on that and a blog, which I'm going to encourage everybody to sign up for. But it's a speech that's been said to feel like a show, entertainment that feels like enlightenment, and music that feels like a difference maker, because everybody feels good when they leave. And that's one thing I think, especially in this moment in time, together, we need to laugh a little bit more. We need to figure out how to do things differently, which is not always comfortable. If you're over 20, you don't want to change. But in The Promise of One, I think one of the things that really resonates with this moment is when you talk about how the kids made fun of you. You had a big mouth. I had a big mouth from a different standpoint. But on page 81 of the book, you talk, so where is the promise of self-acceptance? And in general, if you study the 237 plus interviews I've done with women in business, everybody has this issue with self-acceptance. If they're tall, they want to be short. If they're short, they want to be tall. If they're Italian, they want to be blonde. I mean, it goes on and on. And so there is a gift in self-acceptance. And I think you beautifully and authentically transition that gift of having this big mouth into the most joyful thing you can do for another human being, which is make them laugh and enjoy. Talk to us about what you meant in that chapter.
Well, thank you very much for saying so. I mean, this chapter, now that I'm looking back at it, since you're talking about it, this has been one of the more interesting chapters in the sense of so many people can relate to what I went through in this. I was trying so hard to make the girl that didn't want me like me, or I was trying so much, well, I'm like, hey, you want to go to the dance? And it was like, no, thank you. Why not? So I would just, it was not working for me, Terri. And I found out that through my gifts, that it wasn't just, can I make somebody laugh? What was interesting is I was making people laugh, and then I started to self-doubt, where I was like, maybe they're laughing at me, not with me. And that's a concern when you're, any age. But as a kid, as a 5 or 6 year old, I realized that right away. I was like, I think they're laughing at me. And then I thought, well, what else do I have? What else am I good for if they're just laughing at me? And I became the guy who started to realize that everybody had probably this same kind of self-doubt and self-acceptance. So within my lack of confidence, I created confidence by exploring the fact that I could be the guy who gives compliments, or be the guy who would be accepting of everyone and let them share and express their talents. And so as I accepted my own big mouth, that was where everything changed for me, was to realize, and especially to have a mom who would say something like, when I came home from school and she goes, how was school? Was it great? And I was like, well, they said I'm ugly and I have a big mouth. And my mom said, son, you're not ugly, but you have a big mouth, so you're just going to have to learn to live with that.
Thanks, Mom. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. And she said, why don't you just smile when people say, do that thing with your mouth? Don't go, go, cheese. And I found out that the light that I shine is the light I receive. My mom taught me that. And as we embrace that which makes us, we're not so sure about ourselves, we actually do have a great gift in
that was beautiful. I'd love for you to say that again, that light. Yes. Just do that little light quote again.
Yeah, so the quote is, the light that we shine is the light that we receive.
I want that to resonate with everybody who's with me today and with us. You were the author, speaking of making a girl like you, the author of the Facebook post entitled, I saw my wife at Target today, which has been seen by more than 100 million people. First of all, I want to interview her, okay? Because, when I go to Target, nothing happens, just saying. You were also, as you know, with the National Speakers Association, inducted as one of the youngest into the prestigious Speaker Hall of Fame Awards, which is, we know that's the holy grail of speaking. So, but when you saw your wife at Target, you were not in that little upper group, if I recall. So tell us a little bit about what that was, because that is a fun post. Tell us about that.
Well, this actually happened on December 1st of 2015. So that story is still, wonderfully around. And what happened is I wrote something on Facebook about the story where I said, I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I think I cheated on my wife today. Let me explain. And that was apparently clickbait, which I didn't know I was good at that. But I wrote a great post about me walking through Target by myself as a man, as I would, because I was on my way out of town. I drove to Target and I'm getting my manly things like, beard oil, sardines, beef jerky, a loofah, that kind of stuff. And as I'm headed to find the quickest lane to check out, there was a line with only 2 people, 2 women, a blonde, a brunette. I pull into the lane, I look up and I see there's a brunette and a blonde at the checkout, and in a split second I went, whoa, that is the most beautiful blonde I've ever seen.
I noticed you picked the blonde, but go ahead. Go ahead.
And then I went, well, it was because the brunette, her back was facing me. That was it. I didn't see anything. But the blonde was looking at the counter, and so I was
Ah,
like, "That's a beautiful woman. That's a beautiful girl." And then I went, "Oh, that's my wife." Like, we had not gone to the store at the same time. I didn't know what she was doing that day because I was headed out of town. So that's how this happened. I tried to text her without saying anything and be like, "Hey, sexy mama, you look beautiful today," and nothing, because she was digging through her purse for the coupons, you know. And that's when it hit me. I could jump on the on the counter and be like, "Honey, I'm right here," like do a raptor. I didn't do that. Instead, I just I just stood back and I looked at her and admired her and looked at her and her power, her independence, her beauty that's not only physical, but she just shines beauty. I mean, she's this wonderful, amazing person whom I love. We had been married almost 15 years to that point. And, when you see somebody every day, just kind of, it's just that person you see every day. But what this post was about was a guy seeing his wife at Target, not knowing she was there, and falling in love all over again with the person that he's grown to love. He knows her. But to see the person that we love with fresh eyes and be grateful for the light that they are in our lives. And it went from a cheating post to a I cheated on my wife with my wife promise kept kind of post where we promise ourselves to, be grateful for those that we love. And it went around the world. It was amazing.
it
And
did.
yeah.
It did, and it was the best cheating you ever did. So good for you. But you beautifully segued into The Promise to the One. Tell us about this book, because it's the kind of book, by the way, that you read and then you just kind of keep out because you refer to it back and forth, back and forth. It's not a one and done. And tell us, first of all, how did you decide? Because writing a book, as we all know, is tough enough, but coming up with the title is the toughest. And I know you're going through that with your next book. So tell us about this one. What happened here?
Well, I've been giving the message of the promise ever since that happened with my wife. The Target story seemed to just resonate with so many people. And so it was determined through coaches and others that I had met with that my word was promise. I had been talking about goals and commitments and other things for years, and talents and everything, and promise became the word. And as we explored what does a promise mean, a promise is maybe our promise to our clients and our customers, the people we serve. Maybe it's your client, or it's a boss, or it's the team that you work with, your family at home. We have promises in so many ways. But then there was this final piece, which is what I talk about at the end of a keynote, which is the promise to the one, and that's the promise to yourself. And a lot of people think I'm going somewhere religious with it or whatever they may be, and that's fine. You can go where you want. I like to share that it's the promise to yourself. And so that's why we started this as the first book of what will be a series of many books. The promise to the family, the promise to the team, all of those will be coming out eventually. But the promise to the one is the most important. If you're not keeping promises to yourself, then how can you keep that to the people that you serve? And so it's really an exercise in discovering our own happiness and our level of commitment. And I like to ask the question, why set a goal when we can make a promise? And so it just becomes not this thing where goals aren't important, but rather, we set a goal, we miss it, we make a new one. But if we make a promise, we break it, we have a problem. And so how are we able to, make promises that really are like a sacred goal? And that's why it's fun for, the holidays or into the new year to say to ourselves, these are my promises for 2021. After whatever the heck just happened in 2020, I've got some new promises for 2021.
Well, you do. I was just going to mention that you do make a big distinction between setting a goal when you can make a promise. And if you have any level of core values and integrity, it's one thing to either achieve a goal or set another goal, but it's a whole different thing when you make a promise. And you actually, one of your keynotes is the promise: become a legendary leader and discover your, quote, signature moves. Let's talk about what that really means to you.
Yeah, the signature moves is really that personal brand, if you will, that which makes you distinguishable among everyone. And as our friend Scott McCain says, distinction, or some of the great speakers have talked about it. I like to say signature moves. And so every artist has a signature move, whether it's a performer like Louis Armstrong when he sings It's a wonderful world. Do-do-do-do-da-da-da. Everyone expects our signature moves of us as well, whether we're a realtor or we're a financial guru or we are a performer on a stage. You want to hear the hit songs when you go to a performance. And so we all have a signature move that makes us stand out in a sit-down world. And that's our promise, to share that with our customers, our clients, our team, and share it with everyone that we interact with. And so that's how we become a legendary leader. I truly believe it. That, when I was an impersonator in Vegas, all they wanted me to do was the signature moves of the artist I was impersonating. And so how would I impersonate the person watching or listening? How would I impersonate you? So that's the
Not
question.
her.
It's what they say when you leave the room. That's your signature move.
Isn't that amazing? And so that speaks to that being the one. So when you are intentional about being the one, you're congruent with who you really are, which is self-acceptance, which is a promise to be the best you. So one of the things that I did want to mention, though, is because we have a heart for our military. I've been involved with the certification for military residential specialist, and I have been in the Middle East. And so you did a tour there to support our military in Kuwait, Afghanistan, and Africa. Tell us about that, because that had to be a life-changing experience. It was for me anyway.
It was totally wild. It was amazing. And, I remember getting the call 2014, and I was called by another speaker who said, hey, let's go to the Middle East, and they want us to come perform. I said, why would they have us? He said, because the big celebrities won't go. It's too dangerous. And so I went out there and I had an amazing time for almost a month. Yes, in wartime Afghanistan. They put the helmets on us, the gear to make sure we weren't in danger. And I'll tell you, nothing will bring you to your knees in gratitude and in praise for what's happened in our world, in America, to be safe, and in seeing what our world does to really protect so many countries, than that experience. And it was crazy to me, Terry, to hear them all laughing and singing along and having a great time. And then they would come up to me after the show and they'd say, you're my hero for coming here and performing for us. And I was like, I'm your hero. You're
Yeah.
my hero. And the only thing they wanted of me was to spread the word that those back home, their families, need to be cared for by their neighbors. I was blown away by that as their one need, because I was like, what can we do for you more than make you laugh? They said, go home and take care of our families. Make sure that the neighbors reach out to military families. And I went, okay. And so I blogged about it. It went around the world. People were serving the military families. It was so rad. But that's what they want of us. And so that's our promise to them.
Well, I would like because I always want the author to direct the questions. I know that there's all kinds of canned questions. I know that you do a whole piece on living your calling. And if I read this book, what does that help me do? I mean, a lot of people are not really sure while they're here. I'm always, as a master coach, always interested when somebody goes, well, I'm in sales. Well, we're all in sales, right? But we do it in our own fashion. And so how do you know if you're living your calling? I mean, is it a good place? Is it a happy place? Would you do it for no money? And where would that be in the Promise of One? Or, how do you profile that here?
Very cool question. I'd say that a calling is our river. And if we're in a side tributary or a side stream, we can tell when we're not in the full current and flow of what our resonance of our life and joy ought to be. And so it's not to say that it's a bad thing if we get off into a side stream because we have to make a living doing that thing. But is there a way that we can slowly get our feet back under us so that we can get into the middle of that river, whether it's through our hobbies, our habits, the way that we live our daily life, even if you don't love your job right now? Or maybe you're in a really tough situation, with health or finances or whatever's happening in your 2020 pandemic. There is a way to still find happiness within that, whether that's working on self, maybe that's self-care, maybe that's sleeping a little bit better of hours, going to bed earlier instead of Netflix all night. whether that's eating a little healthier, or waking up and listening to a podcast like this where you're like, oh, that filled me up for the day. I can make it through. And we can continue to steer ourselves back to our calling. I truly believe everyone has their calling. There are plenty of thought leaders that say there's no such thing as a calling. You don't need to try to find it. You just do what you do. And I understand that. But I would say that we have been blessed on a divine level with signature gifts, signature moves that only we can do. And it is our promise to share it with the world. If we don't do that, we're breaking our promise to the world that only we can share. And in that, I feel that is our calling. And everyone has a chance to find that by redirecting, self-analyzing, self-assessing, journaling, prayer, even asking others. Like if I asked you, Terri, I'd be like, hey, what do you think I should be doing for a living? You might say, Jason, I could see you doing these 5 other things, but I see you do what you do, and I think you're on the right path. That gives me some confidence that I'm doing okay, and I keep on my path.
I don't think there's a better way to end this, because you've just made everybody that watched this fall in love with you. And I know they're all going to want to go to your YouTube channel. First of all, where can we get the book?
Oh, the book is on Amazon. That's actually the best place to get it is as an Audible audiobook, because I'm performing it. And so when I say, and now Alvin and the Chipmunks, everybody loves that. That's a part of the performance. So that's the best place. And then obviously I have videos on YouTube. I've just started a TikTok channel because my children said, Dad, you got to do TikTok. Here's a little picture of them. So anyway, I'm all over the place, but jasonhewlett.com is the place. And yeah, I'd love for anyone to check it out. It'd be great.
Well, I hope you'll join us again, because you talk about the 3 steps, identify, clarify, and magnify. And it really makes it simple. And I'm going to tell you, that's why I said at the beginning of this meeting, so you don't put it away, because there are times in your life where everything goes perfectly. And then if you have a last name like Murphy, which isn't even really my last name, things don't ever go perfectly, and you just have to roll with it. And that's when we get out of the rabbit hole and look at that roadblock and figure out a new way. And that's when we discover some of our callings. But you know what's envious about you, besides the fact that, you're adorable, is that you're so much fun to be around. And I know that your wife would be a great interview, and your children are probably talking about you in this very moment. But everybody who has been in your audience loves you. And it's because you make us feel so much better about ourselves, just through your fun and your connection and that authenticity that comes across, because everybody as a kid remembers when they got made fun of. And you just turned that scar into a star. And we just love that about you. Will you join us again sometime in the men's room?
Terri, you're amazing. You're so sweet. You just filled my bucket. I don't know how else to tell you that you're amazing to me, but I'll show you this. I know you have talents I don't have, and I have talents you don't want.
Well, let's
keep being you. You're the best.
Thank you so much for joining us. Go to jasonhewlett.com, get his book. It's a great, great Christmas gift or holiday gift for anybody, because it will change their life. Thank you so much for joining us here on Realty Times Women in Business, Women in Real Estate. I hope you'll join us again.